Just mentioning the word vegan stirs up all kinds of thoughts and emotions. It's certainly a heavy subject. By now, I think most people have at least a vague idea of what veganism is, but many are still quite ignorant. Being ignorant doesn't mean you are stupid. Let's not forget, you, me, and even the most knowledgeable of vegan activists at one point didn't know what veganism was, and therefore didn't put it into practice. I think we can all agree that people simply just don't know any better, and that's okay. Once we were educated, we made changes. I'm quite sure you've heard all sorts of jokes and excuses. It can be quite frustrating, yet after a certain amount of time, that frustration becomes valid. That is because people choose to be willfully ignorant. Willful ignorance is a decision in bad faith to avoid becoming informed about something as to avoid having to make undesirable decisions that such information might prompt.
They would start relating things to cows being like babies, and it was all about emotive feelings and things like that.
Yeah, emotional manipulation techniques and using language and changing the meaning of words, right? Look, that's a baby cow. They don't call it a calf.
To put it simply, it is when people purposely act dumb. This is highly prominent amongst ex-vegan. Unfortunately, some people really are just dumb. However, very intelligent people do this all the time.
Turkeys are weird because they have a strangely humanoid aspect to them, kind of walking around carrying what was once alive. It's gruesome and horrifying. All right. Thank you to you over at the Daily Wire. Thank you to God Almighty above. And thank you to our producers for forcing me to do this horrifying video.
Ironically, playing dumb is a clever manipulation tactic. One way of playing dumb is the use of humor. Humor is used to deflect from a very serious or uncomfortable situation.
It does make us feel better as a population, and for that, Tash Peterson, Vegan Booty, I thank you, ma'am. A furious farmer has tackled a vegan activist during a wild animal rights protest, grabbing her by the scruff of her shorts and hurling her out of a cattle pen.
If you don't laugh, the person can then easily tell you things like, lighten up, stop being so serious. This is for the sake of making you into the bad guy, because making jokes and trying to make people laugh seem innocent. The technique of feigning ignorance often goes hand in hand with feigning innocence.
You know, I'm like playing devil's advocate in my head, and it's hard as a vegan who's been vegan for 5 years. This world will never be victimless. No matter how hard we try, it will never ever be victimless. It's awkward for me to say this. It's hard for me to say this, you know? It's like going against everything I don't know. But it just makes sense. This world will never be victimless.
When disordered characters use this technique, they will either simply act like or loudly protest that they have done nothing wrong and have nothing to feel guilty about or ashamed of. If there's no way they can deny doing something you can prove they did, then they might claim that they had no malicious intent and that any harm that came out of what they did was unintended. This tactic serves the purpose of obscuring the true character of their actions.
I'm over here trying to recover from 3 broken ribs. 3! And all you can be concerned about is your own dang darn feelings. I don't care about your feelings. Oh, I really don't. I'm over here having to wear a CPAP 20 hours of the day to prevent me from coughing. I'm on steroids. I'm taking a lot of painkillers. I'm on morphine. I'm on numbing cream. I can barely sleep. I can barely waddle my fat to the bathroom. And all you can care is, oh, this is just so bad. You need to be concerned about your weight. This has nothing to do with my weight at all.
Now, I'm not claiming this is going to happen to every ex-vegan because, well, vegan or not, it's pretty obvious that if you eat mountains of fast food for years, your health will suffer. I use Nikocado avocado as an example due to the fact that willful ignorance can be quite dangerous. There are many examples of willful ignorance that happen all around the world. In this day and age, we may have been able to prevent an outbreak if the Chinese government was honest and transparent. Many pandemics, for instance, are due to zoonotic diseases.
They don't care. That's why they don't ban certain foods. They don't care. They don't care. GMOs in these foods. For hundreds of years, not hundreds of years, but it's been a lot of years that they've been having these processed foods, growth hormones in it, that's known to mess you up. They don't care. The government don't care. It's about money. They see people having these farms where these chickens are pooping on each other and all this infection and the way they treat cows. It's an unsanitary environment. They don't care.
Despite the truth before our very eyes, people still want to play dumb. But why? Ignorance is bliss, but it also enables you from any responsibility or being accountable for your actions. Vegans are often demonized for this very reason.
And anytime I say this to someone, the response that I usually get from people, especially if they themselves are vegans, is, "What's your problem with veganism?" To which I have to correct them, no, I didn't say I have an issue with veganism, I said I have an issue with vegans. You see, even though I'm not vegan myself and have no plans whatsoever to be vegan in the near or distant future, I still think that there are a lot of benefits to veganism. I think there are health benefits to it, I think there are environmental and sustainability benefits to it, not enough benefits to make me want to give up meat, but still, overall, I don't think that veganism as a concept is a bad thing. I think it actually has a lot to offer people. Even though I am a proud meat eater, I am still really happy that veganism is bringing to light issues that weren't really talked about much before, but that are really important. Things like the fact that most Americans eat way too much meat, way too much processed food, and how much more cost-efficient eating greens instead of meat is. Not to mention that there are still major issues to this day with the meat industry and how many animals who are slaughtered are treated completely inhumanely. All those things need to be talked about, and if nothing else, I am glad that vegans are making people talk about them. And you might be thinking to yourself now, well, if veganism is so great, then why have you made an entire video essentially crapping on vegans? And to be frank, as I'm sure a lot of us out there can attest to, the truth is that a lot of vegans act like jerks.
And the truth is, this is a human problem. We're all, under certain circumstances, willfully blind. What the research shows is that some people are blind out of fear. They're afraid of retaliation. And some people are blind because they think, well, seeing anything it's just futile. Nothing's ever going to change. If we make a protest, if we protest against the Iraq war, nothing changes, so why bother? Better not to see this stuff at all. And the recurrent theme that I encounter all the time is people say, well, you know, the people who do see, they're whistleblowers, and we all know what happens to them. So there's this profound mythology around whistleblowers, which says, first of all, they're all crazy. But what I've found going around the world and talking to whistleblowers is actually they're very loyal and quite often very conservative people. They're hugely dedicated to the institutions that they work for. And the reason that they speak up, the reason they insist on seeing, is because they care so much about the institution and want to keep it healthy. And the other thing that people often say about whistleblowers is, well, there's no point because you see what happens to them. They are crushed. Nobody would want to go through something like that.
What many people forget about veganism is that it is not about the messenger, but rather the importance of the actual message. One of the many flaws of human nature is that we care more about how things are presented to us rather than considering our own faults and actions.
In terms of the emotional impact, they've been in the garden, but they're new arrivals. So thankfully, I'm not attached. Purposely, I didn't get close to them. Watching it now, being part of it now, it's crucial for me.
But it's awful when you see them just before it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to be holding my lambs as they are stunned with tongs that charge to 200 volts.
Okay, let go.
Very, very odd experience. I mean, very traumatic. I think when you just see, 1 minute you've got this live lamb wriggling around, next minute, that's it.
Maybe you have encountered some very quote-unquote crazy vegans, yet does their awkward passion justify your actions of what you contribute to every time you choose to ignore the reality of what you eat? Now that we know what willful ignorance is, and why many people choose this, the real question is, how do we as vegans handle these types of situations? Is there really any way to fix this problem?
But that's not something that you can control. So what I invite you to do instead is find something about the conversation that was awesome, that's something that you did. And this can be something as simple as, well, it was awesome that I actually went ahead and had that conversation. I could have not. There are plenty of people in the world who would love to speak up for animals, and they just don't. They just don't. And how awesome is it that you actually went out there and did it? You spoke up for animals. Maybe you could improve, but you spoke up for animals. How awesome is that? That's amazing. Think about that. Maybe you asked a difficult question in the conversation, and you were like, well, do you think there's a kind way to kill an animal? Be like, I actually asked that question. That is awesome. So focus on that. And the second thing is, what can I learn here? This is a big one for me because one thing that I did at a certain point in my life is I just made the decision that everything that happens in my life, I'm going to use that as a learning opportunity. See, whenever I have a conversation with someone, and all the conversations that we heard at the beginning of this, when I showed you that little clip, every time I get out of them, all I'm thinking about is, what was awesome about this? What did I do great? And what can I learn here? That is all I'm thinking about. Those thoughts about how the world is horrible, how people are horrible, how they don't care, how this is so difficult, I don't have those thoughts at all. Because I'm just focused on what can I learn here. And for example, you can focus on what can I learn from the situation about how the world works and about how people think so that I can become a better advocate over the long run. So for example, I talked to someone and, in one of the conversations that we heard, the guy said, well, it sounds like kind of an asshole thing to do, but yeah, to me, like, my taste is more important. Well, what I'm going to ask myself, instead of being like, I can't believe there are people like this, because maybe you think that. You're like, I can't believe some people would actually say that. How is this possible? This is so horrible. Well, instead of thinking that, all I think to myself is, why might that be? And the reason why is because I can't control that. Right? The question to ask yourself here is, when you talk to someone, can you ever control how they're going to react? You can't. Even though people like to say that, we as vegans, we like to shove our beliefs down other people's throats and all that. I don't think we can do that. Or at least I haven't found that I can do that. So that being the case, we can't do that. So we can't control how other people act, no matter how much we'd like to do that. And that being the case, how does it serve us to be affected by things that don't control us, that we can't control? Sorry. It doesn't serve us at all. So that's why for me, I just never think about all those things. It doesn't matter. Because I can't control it. So all I think about is, what can I learn? Why did this happen? And then I think about, what could I have done differently? For all of you who shared that you attack yourself, where you ask yourself, well, oh man, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, do that, but instead of doing it in a way where you're attacking yourself, just look at it as things that you can learn to try next time.
When people are faced with unpleasant truths, they oftentimes will act defensively or even get really angry. It is important to know that these types of reactions are normal. The conversation may seem like a failure, but you have planted a seed. It will be in the back of their mind, at least for a while. It is also important to remember that for some people, it can take some time. Many vegans theorize that it takes 100 clicks for others to go fully vegan. So, what about the people who remain stubborn and continue to purposely play dumb? If you are around this person on a daily basis, it is important to be persistent. Don't be swayed by their deflective tactics and stay confident. Maybe they won't ever change. But in that moment, you must realize that you are at least temporarily breaking down a mental wall. Deep down, they know that they are playing dumb and just being cowardly.
They want. But freedom doesn't exist if you don't use it. And what whistleblowers do, and what people like Gayla Benefield do, is they use the freedom that they have. And what they're very prepared to do is recognize that, yes, this is going to be an argument. And yes, I'm going to have a lot of rows with my neighbors and my colleagues and my friends. but I'm going to become very good at this conflict. I'm going to take on the naysayers because they'll make my argument better and stronger. I can collaborate with my opponents to become better at what I do. These are people of immense persistence, incredible patience, and an absolute determination not to be blind and not to be silent.
You could say that veganism ruined my vision, but actually the opposite is true. And although the reality of the truth can be harder than the comfort of the lie, it is through this realization that we can actually create a kind of world where we don't need to hide behind a lie to feel comfortable.